it's kind of interesting, the more and more as we look at things like security, how much more prevalent it's affected our our everyday lives now. It's kind of embarrassing sometimes as a nation to sometimes look and see what's been happening lately. And of course, it's been around for a while. I mean, I remember going back, several years ago with the whole Target. You remember the Target? That was definitely one, and that came in through an HVA system, by the way. So somebody left an HVA system of all things, affected from a security standpoint, right? They left some passwords, things like that there. So it's interesting to watch. Even my hometown. So I live up towards Charlotte, North Carolina, and maybe I shouldn't admit this, but Mecklenburg County was hit with ransomware a couple of years ago, which is kind of interesting, right? And it took them a couple of months to get the services back up and running because they chose not to pay the ransom. Because it's also, you're kind of stuck within a rock and a hard place. Do you pay it and then get your resources and get the services back up? Or do you ignore it and actually restore from tape or backups or disk or whatever and try and get the services back up? Because, if you pay once, guess what's going to happen again?
Hit you again.
They're going to hit you again. They know you'll pay. And so even from a political standpoint right now, we're in this world where, I think even Republicans, Democrats, both alike aren't sure exactly what to do. Do you force a law that says you can't pay ransom? But if you do that, then people can't get the services back up potentially. But if you force a law that says you can't, well, then people still attack? Well, probably. So it's, you're stuck within a rock and a hard spot. So it's kind of interesting to watch the economy with that. So first off, let's spend maybe just 30 seconds, maybe introduce yourself, what you do, and your role, and then we'll get into the specifics here in just a minute. But maybe start down at the end here.
Yep, my name is Chris Jones. I'm with AT&T, and I'm responsible for the masters relationship across the country for all of AT&T.
Good deal. We'll get into some of the security-related stuff here in a minute. And Todd, you want to go next?
Good afternoon.
There's no switch.
There's
testing.
Sound great.
Just hold
Good
it close.
afternoon. Todd Catlett, the regional partner leader in the Southeast United States for Rack Space. And I've been doing business with TCG a long time, but not nearly as long as Robert.
And go ahead and go next. I'm sorry.
Good afternoon. My name is Jesse Hunton. I'm a sales engineer with Windstream. I support the channel here in Florida.
Good deal. And again, we've all known security's been in the news forever. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. Other than notice off to the right, just the amount of dollars in there, 20.7 million hours that are spent actually by the victims with all this stuff to resolve their issues. Think about the amount of productivity lost and the amount of dollars lost having to go through that process, right? I mean, it's kind of crazy. Here's another stat, $199 billion, almost $200 billion are looking at by 2025. And again, these are stats I just happen to Google and find some information about. Whatever numbers you believe, whether it's these or others, the bottom line is it's huge numbers, right? So if you get just a tiny percentage of that, then obviously it makes a huge difference in your bottom line and what you're able to get from a recurring perspective. So, and I always start this way. It's an old industry, but yet it's kind of new at the same time. It's old that it's a constant war between the bad guys actually trying to develop new ways to do the attacks versus the good guys, so to speak, trying to invent ways to prevent the attacks to start with, right? So there's a constant struggle between those two dichotomies, right? So it's definitely interesting to watch. And the other thing is, it doesn't exist at every single company. Think about the number of companies you work with, especially in the small to mid-size. I think I read a stat somewhere that said 70% of all businesses don't even have a security policy in place. They don't really have anything written down that talks about what they would do if and when this occurs. And I always heard there's just two types of companies out there. Those who have been attacked and those that have been attacked but don't know it yet. So I think that's interesting when you read about some of those sort of things. So I think it's more common than you probably think of. And the other thing is that the new threat protections involving, behavioral training, right? It's teaching end customers like me sitting at a desk. That's the biggest issue when you deal with security in the cyber world, right? I'm free to click on almost anything I want to, and then spin up and do about anything out there. And again, encrypt the data, do everything, and intercept what I'm doing there. So, or again, I pick up a thumb drive, here at the showroom floor and say, hey, let me plug that in and see what's on there. It's a lot of behavior in terms of what's actually occurring, or behavior in terms of the type of traffic that's out there. Identifying, the zero-day threats where, again, they've developed something that there's not really a signature for yet, that they can detect that it actually is something serious that needs to be avoided, but kind of detecting, when I clicked on that link and it did this, that somehow it spun up traffic out to China, that probably that's not a good thing, right? So kind of identifying those sort of things. So where that traffic's monitored. The other piece of security, especially in the cyber world, is all about layers. It's not a one-stop shop, right? It's not, you put this in place and you're well protected, right? I mean, how many of your customers think, hey, I got a firewall in place, I'm all good, right? But how many customers do you really think that way? They've got a good firewall, doesn't that do it for them, right? And so it's kind of like at your house, right? If you think about a community, maybe you've got a gate outside that protects the folks from coming into the entire community. Maybe they drive down the street, maybe there's a fence in your yard. Well, maybe they get up to through the fence, now there's maybe a dog in place, or maybe there's a locked door. And not just a locked door, maybe there's a deadbolt. And maybe beyond the deadbolt, they see a sign there that says a CPI or ADT or one of those type of companies that does monitoring, right? And maybe they may know some of your preferences in terms of gun control and not so strict on gun control, so they know if they enter, they may have some other issues, right? So I mean, there's many layers of security that we take for granted every single day. And it's not saying you have to do every single one of those, but if I'm a thief, a common, just every ordinary thief, am I going to go to the house that left the front door open, or am I going to go to the guy next door that I know has got, walled up and all this kind of stuff, right? I'm going to go to the easy targets typically. And so doing the small things well and setting up the layers of security can go a long ways to mitigate a lot of this risk, right? And it's not just technology. It's kind of funny, and we'll get into this with the panel here in a second. I used to work at a healthcare organization. And I used to be a network engineer and a security engineer. And so I used to have tons and tons of technology put in place. I worked at a hospital system, had, I think about 4,500, 5,000 employees. And we had a lot of stuff in place. I had, the SIMs, and I had the DLP systems in place. I had the virus protection. I had the firewalls. I had the VPNs. I had the multi-factor authentication. I had all these different services in place. But I didn't always have all the people and the processes in place to make sure that we were following through with all the different events and activities that would occur from those systems, right? It's hard to keep track of all that. And I would have loved to have had some folks like these, and we'll talk about some managed services in a second, to be able to have eyes on glass and have experts on the back end side reviewing all these alerts and all these activities that were occurring to see if they're legit or not, or just false positives that I could ignore, right? So I need to make sure I honed in on the ones that really mattered. And oh, by the way, a bad guy's not necessarily going to attack at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when I'm actually looking at the screen. It might come at 3 a.m. in the morning when I'm hopefully at home and asleep, right? So the cool thing, after all the negative there, 63% plus the 31% for intermediate, there's 94% of the attacks can be handled with very cheap, inexpensive, and moderate type solutions that put in place. So 94% of this can be mitigated by simple type choices we make in a corporation. And we'll ask some of the panels about that here in a second. So, and again, opportunities, the cost of not doing something versus the cost of actually putting some things in place, that's the challenge from a cost perspective. A lot of these guys, I'm sure we'll talk about professional services, may actually start the engagement and lead to monthly recurring, which is a little bit different than most of the sales we think of today. Each supplier probably has a different and a varying solution in place. And in many cases, it may take dual threat. It may take dual suppliers or multiple suppliers to put measures in place. It's kind of like the old saying, you don't want necessarily the person that's actually running the firewalls to necessarily audit and make sure that they're running the firewalls correctly, right? So the fox watching the hen house, so to speak. So there's some things like that to think about as well. But small mitigation steps can lead to huge security gains. And to me, the biggest thing is these guys, in a lot of cases, have SOCs and managed services on the back end and can review and monitor and alert. And again, provide a huge win for most organizations out there. So having said that, let's talk to AT&T, Rackspace, and Windstream. Maybe start at the end there from your perspective. I mean, why AT&T? What are some of the security measures you do have in place, or some security things that AT&T offers that maybe some of the agents aren't aware of or just need to be reminded of?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what I would tell you, and you made a couple comments there as you were talking, security is a buzzword of today, but security is not new, right? And it's kind of like in our industry, we get caught up on buzzwords and trends and things, but it's kind of what's old is what's new again. And I do think that COVID, another comment you made, COVID and everything we lived through, we as an industry spent a lot of time hardening people's offices, right? And then in that March, 18 months ago, all of a sudden everyone went home. And all of the effort we put into hardening people's offices, now you've got people on all these residential services and just all hell broke loose. And the COVID pandemic was an incredible time if you're a cyber hacker, right? You had all of these opportunities to break into our networks that no one had ever thought about before. No one had ever thought about having an entire global workforce working from home on residential consumer grade services. And so as you think about what's happening going forward, and as we come out of the pandemic and we go into whatever the next phase of this is gonna look like, we're gonna see people continuing to work from all over the place, right? Not everyone is gonna go back to an office. You hear people that are never gonna go back to an office. You hear people that are very hybrid. I know at AT&T, we're gonna have people all over the place. And what we all need to do, and you all as advisors to customers need to start thinking about is, how do you take this old industry that people didn't buy into and move it into this next phase where you're gonna have a hybrid environment? And I think what you need to think about is, security is kind of like insurance. How many of you, when you buy a house and you start talking to your insurance agent, go, you know what, I want to buy the most expensive insurance you offer. Or when it's annual medical insurance time, right? We all tend to look for how can we get our insurance costs down? How can we spend less? Well, that's what security is. Security is all about protecting yourselves from the worst case situation, not what you want to have happen. And businesses cheap out on this front, right? And so when you think about AT&T, and a lot of people don't realize this, we're the second largest security provider in the world, right? And when you think about the network that we operate, the traffic that we operate over our network, some of being the second largest security provider in the world is also protecting our network. We are a threat, we're attacked virtually daily, and the learnings we have from protecting our own network and all the traffic that traverses over our network is also now what we're pivoting and positioning with customers, right? And so it's really, really important to think about that. And one of the things that was just talked about is we actually offer a threat analysis, and it's something that you all can position with your customers, and it's a relatively cheap service where we actually send in cybersecurity specialists to do an analysis of the customer's prem, right? And it pays you a little bit of commission, and it's a relatively small cost to the customer, but what it does is it turns into a shopping list for the customer in terms of what do they need. Yeah. Right? And we've got case studies where a small sale will lead to $75,000 of monthly recurring charges that you then start getting paid residual compensation on that the customer didn't even know they had. And from our perspective, what's so good about it is it's network agnostic, right? So you don't have to be an AT&T customer for us to do this threat analysis. You can go out to any of your customers. And if you think about being a trusted advisor, and you want to become a security specialist, do you want to learn how to be the security specialist, or do you want to bring someone in who is a security specialist that makes you look best in class, right? We all get so wrapped up in, I have to be the best at it, I have to know what I'm talking about. The reality is all you need to know is, who do I bring in? You need to make sure that they're trustworthy in front of the customer, and with that output that we give you, now you have a path that you can work your customer through that's going to protect them, and it's going to be a nice revenue generator for yourself.
I think what I'm hearing is, it's not just, you guys can help provide a roadmap to helping secure their environments and going down that path with them and so on and so forth. It becomes almost like a shopping list for them to tick off the boxes. Here's some of the things you need, and here's how critical they are, and here's some of the things that you can do to mitigate some of those risks.
Yeah, right? I think a lot of people, and the security space is it's growing and it's very popular, and there's a lot of providers that are coming into the space, and I think everyone, they get a very narrow focus, right? My solution does X. And I think as agents who are working with customers, You don't want to be focused in any one specific area as much as you need to help the customer solve for all of the problems. And so think of it back to insurance, right? If you're buying medical insurance, you're getting medical, you're getting dental, you're getting vision, you might be getting pet care, you're doing your spouse, you're doing your children, right? Security is kind of like insurance. You don't know what your problem is going to be, so you need to work with someone that can help you across the board and make sure that whatever your challenge is that you're facing, they can help you identify with. And so I think it's important to work with a provider who has more than a single solution, but that can cross the entire category and make sure that when you're with your customer, because what good does it do to sell them, say, email security, a secure email gateway? Sell them that, and they get a DDoS attack.
Yep.
You haven't helped them. You need to be looking at the full portfolio.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of switching gears a little bit, I mean, rack space, I normally think of, giant hyperscalers and Azure and AWS and fanatical support and all that kind of stuff. But you guys have a first-in-class SOC and other things, security operations centers and stuff. So maybe talk to me a little bit about what you guys offer from a security standpoint.
So we have two SOCs, one in San Antonio and one in London, and we have currently 400 plus cybersecurity experts on staff. And one of the problems is you said everyone hardened their buildings and their their networks, right? And now all of a sudden you have this changing and challenging threat landscape where you have people all over, right? And so we have a zero trust architecture framework mentality, right? No device should be trusted. And so you have to look across everything again, because I think from my side, for agents out there, security ought to be the first thing you're probably talking about, because as you mentioned, it opens up all these other doors, right? When you do a security assessment for a company, you start to find where they're deficient, right? And everyone is deficient somewhere. That then lead to other opportunities, other workloads that come along. And you may do a small pro serve engagement that turns into a very large monthly recurring opportunity. But this is ongoing and it's going to continue. And so, we have a big investment in security. It's incredibly important, right? We protect all of our assets, all of our 130,000 customers globally, their websites, the things that we're doing for them on the infrastructure side. And, I think that this is the greatest time, just like UCAS was last year, for growth in, for the work from home environment, that this presents a similar kind of opportunity right now to go talk to people about security. Because again, it's going to open up the doors. And so you don't want to be an expert at everything. You're never going to be able to do that. Number one, it's just, there's so much information and it changes so quickly. You want to bring in a trusted partner, that will answer those questions, that will drill down, that will find, again, the areas that you can be helpful to those clients. And when you earn that trust and you're protecting their assets, right, other things are going to come along from that. So, again, security has led to some significant opportunities for partners that I've worked with this year that initially looked like they might be small, to begin with, that turned into very large deals. And it's easy to see a 50 to 75K MRR deal in security that then, again, may open up some other opportunities.
Yeah, maybe talk about if you've got a case study or two kind of in your head, maybe that started off kind of small, maybe just a professional services engagement, and then led to something, whether it's full out security type feature sets, things like that maybe got put in place, but also maybe led into other conversations. I think one of the things a lot of the partners here are looking for is a way to go kind of wide and deep and kind of go kind of across the technology stack as well. So maybe spend just a minute or so on that.
Sure. Earlier in January this year, I had a partner come to me. They had two customers that were impacted by the solar winds, right? And they were devastated. They were down 2.5 days. They were frantic to try to find a solution. And so the original, approach and investigation was all around the security. But what happened, I had a deal that was going to be maybe 29, 30K a month that turned out to be over $100,000. Once we got in and we fixed the security problems, there were other things. There was desktop as a service, right? They had their workers at home. They needed to access their files. They needed to be secure, right? They had an SAP environment that we ended up migrating and bringing over to private cloud. And so that particular instance that looked like it was going to be a 29K deal turned out to be $130,000 a month. And then on top of that, there was a $200,000 pro serve engagement that came for the data migration. And so, again, the agent was just talking to him about one specific thing, but once we started to peel back the onion, then there were a lot more things that we could do to help them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And pulling Windstream into the conversation here, I mean, What are some things you guys do? I mean, what are some specific technology, buckets that you guys kind of help solve from a security perspective? I mean, everybody kind of thinks of you guys from a MPLS and sd-wan and some of those, but what are you guys doing from a security standpoint?
So, security is a part of that as well, right? So when we think SD-WAN, it's a buzzword today. People also need security, and it should be part of the conversation when you get in there. But it's also, the small to mid-sized business. How do you manage that? How do you support that with a limited IT team? You don't have the budget to invest in security personnel or have training in that regard. So our M&S product, our Managed Network Security with Fortinet, it's built within our core network, and it's controllable by our app, our WeConnect portal. So easy to use, 24/7 CSOC monitoring and managing networks. So.
Yeah, and I guess from a sales perspective, I mean, if I'm a sales partner sitting here and I'm hearing this is like insurance that nobody loves paying for anyways, to be honest with you. I mean, we all know that we hate insurance, we hate taxes, we hate a lot of those sort of things, right? It's something we just have to do, right? And we're forced by the government to make sure that, or at least the lender, if I buy that house, I don't have a choice. I'm gonna have to buy, unless I bought it straight out, I'm gonna have to put insurance on it. So maybe, how do you overcome some of those objections a lot of customers have? What are some key phrases or key terms or again, some key questions that they can ask to kind of uncover and kind of force customers to think about that?
Talking about, what do you have a security budget? Is that something you're training your staff, or you have somebody that's security-centric on your IT team? Sometimes there's a lot of gaps there. So uncovering that should be part of the opening dialogue with any new customer.
Okay, and maybe if you've got like a case study or something you can kind of think of real quickly that maybe you've walked into recently that went down a security path with you guys?
Sure, absolutely. So a national retail provider was looking for SD-WAN for business continuity, needed a failover there, but there was a gap. They didn't look into the firewall. They were doing it themselves, and we said, hey, this is something that we have. We have a full CSOC available to monitor your network 24/7. And so we offered cloud firewall. So, limited CPE, a single CPE on site, but, cloud firewall was an offering we have, and it played very well into their solution. So.
Yeah, good. And switch it back a little bit on the AT&T side, again, maybe 30 seconds on, I know a lot of cases when you start with professional services, but maybe talk about the importance of having experts like you guys have on the back end to review and look through the logs and all the different places and parts and pieces, because I think sometimes people think I just go a buying list, go pick up a bunch of stuff, and that magically secures me from the rest of the world, right? I mean, why is that not the case, I guess?
Well, we actually just had a cyber evangelist come and talk to our team, and one of the things she talked about was there's a lot of, to your point, hardware that's been purchased, a lot of software that's been purchased, and the password to get in is 1111, right? So people are investing, but then they're not actually using it the right way, right? And so if you're not implementing, right, it's one thing, people feel good, I bought it, I have a firewall, I have whatever, but if you're not changing passwords, if you're not configuring it, if you don't have people that know what they're doing, right, we're all gonna have the same password, we're all gonna be 1111, we're all gonna have 1111 with an exclamation point if it's a complicated password, right? You all know what the rules are, and probably every single person in the room has the same password. The other thing that I just want to say, this room, this building historically is very focused on wireline services, right? And when you think security, think wireline. But what is every single one of you doing during this conversation at least once? And I'm watching. You're all staring at your phone. That device needs to be secured. And think about the customers you sell to. Big businesses, companies like where I work, we have mobile iron, we have all kinds of stuff. It's probably even more hardened. I forgot my password on my iPad this morning. They frickin' wiped it clean on me, right? So, but what I tell you, think about your customers. How many of your customers have Gmail accounts, right? How many of your customers, that wireless device that's in front of you, that is completely and totally open. And people need to be thinking about, this is not just wireline services that you need to secure. You need to be securing wireless devices, and think about trends like IoT. We're putting SIM cards in everything, Coca-Cola machines and all sorts of stuff. If you're not securing that, and you're not working with a provider that can talk to you and your customers about not only wireline security but wireless security, you're leaving half of the opportunity wide open. You need to have those kinds of conversations.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And from a rack space perspective, I mean, you guys not only provide the SOCs and things, but obviously have huge amounts of data center type options as well. And maybe talk about, even things as simple as, I know it's a pain in the butt, but things like patching servers and why they're so critical and all the other things and workstations and all those end devices. I mean, it's not just, the fancy firewall sitting there. There's lots of other parts and pieces of that.
There absolutely are. And one of the big problems we see too is people they generate so much data, right? All of these security softwares that people use. And people don't monitor the log files and pay attention, right? And so a lot of bad things happen, absolutely. And it's incredible. Again, people will invest a lot of money but not have the expertise. And that's one of the problems too. Cybersecurity experts are incredibly expensive. A lot of companies can't afford to have it, right? And they think they've done the best that they can do by going out and buying it, right? But then again, you've got to monitor. You have to do all this patching. It's critical, right? And so we have a very thorough process for all of that, right? And we work with the companies on times to do all of these things. But if a security patch comes out and it's got to be implemented right away, we're going to do those things because it's again, hackers are become more and more sophisticated. You have nation states attacking businesses. Our DoD government assets. And it's continuing to escalate now. And you see it every day in the news. It happens to someone. Do you pay the ransomware? Do you not pay? I think a lot of companies are forced to do it, right? Because it's critical to the pipeline, right? They forked over the money. Fortunately, that was thwarted. That was pretty incredible what the FBI did there. But we are very serious about monitoring those things 24/7, 365, applying patches, making sure number one that everyone is protected to the extent that we possibly can. As you said, with software technologies now, you can protect about 98% of everything, right? But no one's going to be perfect, right? There's always going to be someone better and smarter that can get into any network in the world, and is evidenced by what happens when you have a team of Russian hackers or North Koreans that's all they do, sit in a building and probe accounts, right? Mobile devices, get in, people leave their phones open, passwords. Again, behavioral things are incredibly important, right? To teach across the board for employees that the behavior to protect to the extent that you possibly can.
Yeah. No, and you mentioned, how expensive different security experts are. I mean, how many of those did you mention?
We have 400, just over 400 cybersecurity experts. In San Antonio, interesting fact, Washington, D.C. is the number one cybersecurity, from a personnel, right, the number of people. San Antonio is second in the world. There's a lot of military bases there. So we have a lot of veterans, people that have worked in the Department of Defense in different branches of the military. And so again, we're very proud of the team of people that we have and the work that we do. We could have thwarted the SolarWinds thing. Unfortunately, we didn't have that opportunity. But again, I think for all of you guys out there, you should approach your customers about security. That's going to open up a ton of doors, and you'll make a lot of money at it.
Yeah, and from a Windstream perspective, and again, I mean, people think of you guys for circuits and stuff, but you guys do a lot of managed security types products and services, and talk about why it's so critical, not just to, everybody go out and buy a firewall, they buy all these different technologies, the technology, shopping list, so to speak, but again, why go down and manage a product for those services?
We have a team that are experts in that field, right? And so, you can go buy a firewall and set it to any, and, it's a great boat anchor. It's not going to help your business at all. So, having a partner where you can say, I need SD-WAN, I need UCaaS, I can also apply a managed, network security to that as well is critical. It's a part of it. And also in the hybrid world we live in, people are working from home, they're mobile, they need to be able to tie in. So with our Fortinet M&S product, secure remote access is part of that offering is included. So
yeah, maybe talk about remote workers from home. Maybe one of the things is one of the gentlemen brought up earlier is that we're all of a sudden forced with this pandemic to send almost everybody to the house. I mean, that creates a nightmare from a security perspective, I would think. So maybe some of the things you guys are doing from a remote worker perspective.
Sure, absolutely. So, partnering with Fortinet was key to that, right? They're in the Gartner's Magic Quadrant, one of the top firewall companies in the world. And, our entire M&S offering is built on that. So it's supported by us. We don't include third party or an aggregate. It's all supported by Windstream. So having, that one hand to shake, you reach out, and having somebody that can care for an incident from start to finish is critical, right?
Yeah, no, and I know we're running short on time here, so we're going to kind of wrap it up. But maybe just real quickly, any questions from the audience to start with? Any questions?
I just want to say, we don't use 1111, we use welcome one exclamation.
Oh, so he's more sophisticated. He's more sophisticated than 1111. It's welcome one. So So you're welcome if you come into our network, by the way. So.
Did you guys write that down?
There's actually a comedian on YouTube that does a 20-minute shtick on passwords that I stumbled on. You should go look for it. It's entertaining.
Yeah, I posted one time. Admin and welcome was one of the things with a Cheeto over a lock, so it's just easy to obviously get in. But no, spend maybe starting this way. Maybe 30 seconds. If I'm a partner sitting here and I'm new to the security conversation, maybe some things to think about, or more importantly, how are some ways to engage? We talked a lot about trying to get customers to think a little differently. So maybe a question or two you think would be something appropriate for them to bring up with an end customer.
Aside from who manages security and what the process is there, how do you review log retention? You have log retention. You review that. Do you make sure that your firewall's up to date? These are opening questions, right? I think the word security right now with all the news and everything is a good line opener anyway. So.
Yeah. I know for me, I can tell you, I did not have time to review logs and all this stuff. We had SIMs in place, and basically a SIM is nothing more than it takes a collection of all the different devices, all the logs and alerts and all that stuff, kind of compiles it together and correlates that into action items in terms of which ones you need to go out and review. But you still get tons and tons of those. Trying to get somebody to kind of decipher that for me would have been tremendous. And I didn't do that off hours in many cases. So again, it definitely can help to a managed provider like you guys. So maybe you want to spend again, same question for you as well, Todd.
So what we've done to help all of you, we've created a security toolkit, right? Because agents invariably are not comfortable talking about things that you don't know well, right? Network and UCAS, and so security is kind of that uncomfortable area. And so we've created questions, we've created email template, things to probe your existing clients with and prospects. And so, I always ask people, do you know if your data is secure? Because truly, they probably don't. How many cybersecurity people do you have on your team, right? And so, again, we've created to try to make it very easy for you to look for that, that business and give you, again, an email template where all you got to do is put your name in it and your email signature, send it off. We've got a whole series of open-ended questions that kind of map to technology solutions. And again, to try to make it very easy. And when you uncover one of those opportunities, then just reach out. I will align the right resources to help facilitate, winning the business for you.
Cool. No, I appreciate it. And last but not least, AT&T, from your perspective.
Yeah, what I would tell you, we actually we just published, I think it's the 12th annual cybersecurity white paper that we put out. And what I would tell you, talk to whomever you work with at TCG and they can get you access to it. It's not a product pitch. It's not a solution pitch. It's written from a customer's perspective, right? So if you want to think about what are the conversations you should be having with your customers, what are the things that your customers should be worrying about, start with that white paper and look at where the industry has gone, what customers are worried about. As I said, it's written from a customer perspective. You're not going to see lots of products and solutions in there. But customers don't want to hear about products and sales pitches and those sort of things. They want to understand what are the things they should be thinking about, what are the things they should be worrying about. As to our earlier conversation, this is the 12th annual one we've done. This isn't a new field, right? And one of the things that I think is really important, if you want customers to trust you, don't sound like a used car salesman. Don't come out there like you're a hammer looking for a nail. Talk to the customer in customer language. Talk to them about things that they should be worried about, and those things, they will then lead the discussion into an opportunity for you to put solutions in place that they've identified. Because, we kind of live in a world where we don't want to talk about fear, uncertainty, and doubt, but in this space, I would scare the hell out of your customers, right? I would talk to them about ransomware and DDoS attacks and what happens if you lose your network or someone takes it over, right? But again, I wouldn't turn it into a big product pitch. I would turn it into customer language. What are they doing about this in this part of the industry? And then they'll lead you where they want to go.
No, sounds great. Give it up for these folks up here.
Thank you.